So the work I'm going to talk to you today about is a project that we started in 2015, and it's looking at evaluating a dart delivery method for managing kangaroos using a contraceptive. And this is work that I'm undertaking with Dr. Lynn Hines from the CSIRO and also Dr. Doug Eckery from the Wildlife Research Centre here. That's right. Okay, so the ACT, so the Australian Capital Territory, it is located here, oops, going the wrong way. It's located here in the southeast of Australia. Within the ACT, a lot of this area is actually national park. So more than 70% of the ACT is actually open space area, and 55% of it is nature reserve. In the north of the ACT is the city of Canberra, and that's the capital of Australia. And you can see from this map over here why it's often referred to as the bush capital. These dark green areas here are nature reserves that are scattered around and within the city, and then all of this light green is rural properties and other open space area. So because of all this amazing habitat and the lack of big predators like dingoes in this environment, we're also the kangaroo capital of Australia. We have 4 big macropods in the ACT, and the eastern grey kangaroo is the most abundant and widespread. And in terms of its distribution in Australia, you can see here, it's the grey area here, so up and down the eastern side of Australia. So eastern grey kangaroos in the ACT, they're the largest and most abundant native mammal. So they have a really, really important role in our grassy ecosystems in terms of their grazing and their impacts on this environment. In some areas, we have them in really high densities and high population growth. So we've measured up to 7 kangaroos per hectare, and growth up to about 40% per year, which is quite high. Because of these high densities, there's some areas where the heavy grazing by kangaroos is causing environmental impacts. We've also got economic impacts on rural lands, and we have a huge number of motor vehicle collisions with kangaroos in Canberra. We estimate that there's about 14,000 accidents with kangaroos every year. So because of these issues, there is a need to manage kangaroos within the ACT. We have a management document which guides the management of kangaroos in the ACT, and the goals of this are firstly to maintain populations of kangaroos. So that's appreciating that they're really important ecologically in our grassy ecosystems, but also they're important for residents and visitors in terms of being able to see these amazing animals in the bush capital. But having said that, we do need to manage and minimise the environmental, economic and social impacts of these kangaroo populations. So this document contains all policies related to kangaroo management. There's information about animal welfare. It details the culling processes on rural lands to look at the address the economic impacts, and also the environmental impacts. And we have a culling program in some of our urban nature reserves to address those issues. In the plan, it details that at the moment shooting is the preferred method in terms of humaneness and efficacy, but there are policies in our plan that state that the government will continue to support research into fertility control. So the main focus of the management of kangaroos in the ACT is within our nature reserves and in these native grassy ecosystems. So as I said before, kangaroos are really, really, really important in this environment. We need them to maintain that grazing pressure on the grass. We don't want too much grass, but we also don't want too little grass. We have some threatened communities within these nature reserves. So there's the natural temperate grassland and also the yellow box red gum grassy woodland. There's only small fragments of these habitats left, so it's really important for us to protect those. And there's also a suite of endangered species that live within these. And these animals rely on the ground layer vegetation. So they need structure, they need places to hide, they need places for insects to be, for them to feed, birds, ground nesting birds, those sorts of things. So kangaroo management in Australia generally is quite controversial. we have done surveys of residents in the ACT, and these have been done in 2008, 2011, 2015, and we've just recently done another one, but I don't have the results for that one yet. The 2008 one was done before we had a management plan and before there was any conservation culling. And what you can see, so this is the 2015 results, is in general, residents are very supportive of the management of kangaroos. So 74% of residents believe that it's important to have kangaroos in reserves, so they value the kangaroos. Only 7% are against culling under any circumstances. 76% support culling in reserves for those conservation purposes that I've just mentioned, and this has increased from 59% back in 2008. 65% are satisfied with the management of kangaroos, and as I mentioned before, we have a high roadkill record of incidents, and this is where our 14,000 estimate came from. So 8% of people that were surveyed hit a kangaroo in the last 3 years. And the other interesting thing that we asked them about is fertility control, and 76% of people believe it's important to develop and apply fertility control to kangaroos in the ACT. So the ACT government has been supporting research into fertility control for kangaroos since 1998. So it's been something we've been looking at for quite some time. And that's because it's seen as it could provide a really useful additional management tool for the ACT. And in particular, in these urban reserves that are quite discrete areas that are surrounded by suburbs or high-speed roads. So your population of kangaroos is quite contained, and we think that that's where it's going to be most useful. In some situations, fertility control may be able to replace culling completely, but we don't think this is going to be the case, at least in all of the ACT. In some areas, the kangaroo population is too high. Fertility control is not going to reduce that population quick enough for us to get the environmental benefits that we're after. So what we think the best way to use it would be is to reduce the population through culling down to the desired level, then apply fertility control, and that would reduce the amount and frequency of culling over the next few years by limiting the population growth. So we're talking about populations of 100, 200, 500 kangaroos. For this to be a feasible option, we need something that is single dose, long lasting, and remotely deliverable. Before I go too much further, I thought I'd just give you a very, very brief introduction to eastern grey kangaroo reproduction. In Australia, we have lots and lots of marsupials, so this, I guess I probably take this a bit for granted. I thought, I better explain this a bit. Eastern grey kangaroos in our region breed seasonally, so they can breed any time of year, but mating is most common in spring and early summer. Their gestation period is only 36 days, and they give birth to tiny, tiny, tiny little babies that are about this big. And that young crawls up to the pouch, enters the pouch of the mother, and attaches to one of the 4 teats. Within the pouch, this young develops over the next 9 or so months. You can see here, there's a little bulge starting to show here with the small pouch young here. And this one here is probably about getting 9 to 10 months old. Once they get that age, that young will come out of the pouch, and it'll be going in and out of the pouch, getting used to its surroundings. Final pouch emergence is about between 10 and 11 months, and once that animal has come out of the pouch permanently, that's what we call a young at foot. And that young animal will continue to be associated with the mother, and they're not weaned until they're approximately 18 months old. But once that young comes out of the pouch, the mother will produce another young, and so she'll have 2 on the go at any one time. And so each young has its own teat, and different milk is produced from those teats depending on the development stage of the young, which is pretty interesting. A lot of kangaroos do what's called embryonic diapause. So shortly after they give birth, they'll breed again, and that embryo will sit in diapause and won't develop until that young has come out. Eastern grey kangaroos don't do that a lot. If conditions are good, they do sometimes do that when their existing young is about 6 months old. Okay, so there's a lot of different products that have been tested on kangaroos. One of those that we're working on at the moment is Gonacon, immunocontraceptive vaccine, and we've heard a little bit about this already. Basically what this vaccine does is it produces antibodies which bind to GnRH, which is, whoa, I'm going the wrong way, which is produced in the brain, and it stops the flow of hormones. It's been used around the world. In Australia, it's not registered for use, so we're using it as a research product. The first test of Gonacon in kangaroos was done in 2008, and it was injected by hand into a small number of subadult kangaroos. We had 100% success for 3 years, and after 10 years, there was 70% of them were still infertile. But the issue with this is that capture and injecting by hand is very resource intensive, and you have to anaesthetise the animals. Which brings me to our current project. What we're looking at doing is just simply darting the vaccine straight into the animals. So we have 3 different stages in this project. Firstly, to develop a dart delivery method for delivering this to kangaroos. So looking at what's the best components for darting and marking the animals. The next part is to evaluate the effect of this method on the kangaroos and compare it to the standard hand-injected method. And then thirdly, evaluate the effect of delivering Gonacon on populations. So what we've done there is we've selected a few small urban sites where we can get close to the animals as a first step, and we're looking at treating as many females in that population and maintaining that treatment over years and comparing the fecundity rate, so the number of young that are produced, with and the population growth with untreated sites. So I won't go into this in too much detail, but basically our first step was to do a lot of trials on carcasses and targets to look at what were the best components of for darting this vaccine into kangaroos. We also need a marking system for marking the animals. And what we found through our trials is that you can see up here, there's these really big darts which combine an injection and a marking system. We decided that they were too heavy and unsafe to use on kangaroos. So what we did as an interim measure is we tested a 2-shooter method, where we had one shooter shooting a dart that contained Gonacon and a second that shot a dart that didn't have a needle that sprayed paint on the animal. That worked quite well in some cases after a lot of practice. You can see down the bottom here, there's a little dart sticking in here, and it's a bit hard to see, but there's a yellow mark here on the animal. That's the paint that we chose as the best for marking animals. More recently, we've been working with new dart manufacturer, and they have designed a smaller, lighter dart for us here. So looking at the efficacy of dart-delivered versus hand-injected Gonacon, we've got on this graph, we've got the 3 different treatment groups. Firstly, we've got the animals that were hand-injected with Gonacon, the ones that were dart-delivered with Gonacon, and then those that were treated with a sham vaccine. The orange arrows just indicate when that treatment was given, and the numbers above here are just the sample size. So you can see at the time of treatment, most of the animals had young, and with both the hand-injected and the dart-delivered Gonacon, that's dropped down quite significantly since then. So we've got 11% breeding here with our hand-inject at this point in time, and only, I think it's 8% here. So it's only a few animals, which is really good. So how does that translate in terms of population level control? So this graph here is looking at population level fecundity. So what we do here is we go out into the populations at the end of September, when you can see all the big bulgy pouches, and assess the adult females and determine how many are breeding and how many aren't. And you can see these are our untreated sites, and you can see that all of these populations, more than 50% of those females each year in those populations have a young. Looking at our treated sites, again, we've got the arrows which are indicating when that treatment was started, and you can see as soon as that treatment, the year after that treatment was given, we've seen quite a drop in the number of young that are produced in that population. So that's looking at not just our tagged animals that we treated in the initial year, it's looking at all the animals. So it's picking up those animals we might have missed in the first year or new females to the population. or young animals that have just started breeding. And each year what we've done since that initial treatment is we've gone back in and we've DART vaccinated any breeding females that we found. So we're being able to maintain that low level of fecundity in these populations. Looking at annual population growth, what we're finding is that population growth varies between years and between sites quite a lot. So this is something that we need to look at over the long term. We're seeing some sites going up in some years, some sites going down in other years. So we're starting to see trends where our treated sites are starting to drop off. But see here, this is an untreated site that's bouncing around a little bit. The trend is generally upwards here. This is a site where the black lines are where cullings happen, and you can see that was spoken about before, that recovery after culling, which is the thing that we're trying to stop and trying to maintain our populations. So the big question is this method more efficient and cheaper than other methods? This information is based on our research sites that we've worked on so far. So these are sites where it's easy to approach the kangaroos. And what we found in these areas that DART delivery is at least 50% more efficient and could be between 75 and 90% cheaper than capturing, anaesthetising and treating these animals by hand. We've had some preliminary modelling done that looked at over 20 years the comparison between DART delivery and shooting. And again, the shooting costs are based on what it costs us to shoot kangaroos in that urban environment, which has a lot of additional costs that you wouldn't have in a more remote area. And what that's showing us is that DART delivery would be 30% cheaper than shooting in the long term. But at this stage, we're not clear about how that would go in a bigger site where the kangaroos are more wary of people and it's harder to DART them. So just finishing off, what do we know so far? We know now that we can deliver Gonacon to kangaroos. We've got an injection marker DART that we're working with at the moment, that we're testing with at the moment, and it works for short distances, but we need to do some more testing on longer distances and refine that marking system so that we're going to be sure that we can tell which animals we've treated in the population. DART-delivered Gonacon causes infertility for at least 3 years, which is really promising, and we're starting to see those population level effects as well. And it has the potential to be more efficient and cheaper than capture and treatment and shooting in the long term. So where to from here? Firstly, we need to continue monitoring these populations and work out how long this method lasts in terms of causing infertility. As I said, we need to refine the marking system to scale it up to other sites. We're looking into doing more population modelling and working out, so looking at some of our reserves and coming up with the best recipe in terms of where would it be best to deliver this method and how would it be best to do it. And finally, to then trial the method in a free-ranging population. And I'll leave it there.